Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning into today's episode of Armchair Gaming. I am your host, the Unobserved Gamer, hanging out with you today, playing a little bit of Dark Cloud 2. In last week's episode, we shared our first series on the Unobserved life, which there's a quote who I don't remember in its entirety, and essentially goes as the unobserved life worth living. I don't remember who said that. I have it in like several textbooks, and I just cannot recall who said it. I should pull up my books at some point and do some reading rather than reading new material. But in the first episode, we looked at MMORPGs, especially Final Fantasy XIV, and what happens to characters, both NPC and player characters, after they have disappeared. And by that I mean when you log off. And we used an MMORPG as the first one because those exist in a persistent universe. That is, it's a world that continues even when you are not paying attention. This time around, we're taking a look at an offline game, a single-player game. And if you're unfamiliar with the Dark Cloud franchise, Dark Cloud 2 takes place in a very clearly Earth-like environment. Where you play as two characters, Maximilian and Monica, and quick side note, this game came out right around the thralls of puberty for this particular individual. Monica may or may not have been a part of a weird sexual awakening, but that is a tangent for another day. So it's an action-adventure RPG with a really interesting story, and we're going to take a look at the story because it also gives us a really unique opportunity to explore time travel and the ramifications of altering the past, the present, and the future, which is pretty exciting. But when you meet the two characters, I guess the best thing for us to do is, I guess the argument I want to put forth is that the NPC characters in this game certainly exist, and we'll see some of them at the end of this video while we're hanging out. But Max and Monica, when you turn the controller off, or when you turn the console off, not the controller, when you're not playing the game, where do they go? What happens to them? There's this weird sense of suspended animation, and it's one thing on its own to discuss the agency of these characters, because there's this deterministic nature around who they are and what they are. But they're when we play as these characters, when we control them, it's as if they're alive and they're telling a story. And if you want to suspend disbelief for a moment, you're being an observing, or I guess you're being an agent who is observing their life and their story. So if you suspend disbelief and assume that video game characters that you play as have a real life, what is it that happens in the universe when you turn the console off or turn the game off? And in last week's example, when we looked at Final Fantasy XIV, if we assume that all people have their own set of agency, and if we ignore the principle that private privilege denies me the ability to evaluate humans as more than, say, an algorithm, if we assume that people are in fact people, in a persistent universe like Final Fantasy XIV, your character must kind of, in essence, go to sleep somewhere, because the universe continues without them. The universe continues to play out and do its own thing, which is kind of how we think life works, right? When you go to bed, the world keeps turning, right? And that's what happens with, like, major world events on the other side of the world. Like, I guess terrible but accurate example for the times is the current discussion of continued bombing of Syria. When I go to bed at night, events will continue to unfold there, in much the same way that they are. Even though I can't see it or witness it, the understanding is that humans exist to do their own thing, and that's kind of what's going on right now. So in this game, in Dark Cloud 2, there's something fundamentally different, because the universe requires my observation in order for it to exist, right? If I'm not there to observe it, then it stops being. The universe, it's almost as if, is it Bertrand Russell has a weird limerick, and I'll be looking it up as we're talking, because it plays very interestingly into what we're talking about here. But basically, was it Bertrand Russell? Bertrand Russell? I'm looking it up right now. I could be not any more incorrect in that quote as I. According to Goodreads, it's Ronald Knox, and it's, there was a young man who said, God must find it exceedingly odd to think that the tree should continue to be when there's no one about in the quad. Reply, Dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I am always about in the quad, and that's why the tree will continue to be since observed by yours faithfully God. And I think this particular limerick / quote plays out very well when we look at the universe of this game, but single player games exist in, because there's this sense of not invisibility. What's from over here? There is this sense of all power on behalf of the player, right? As we play these games, when you input the game directly, you kind of control the outcome. There is this overbearing sense of power that you have in your hands, and obviously there are limitations as game developers are trying to tell a story, and often that story requires some kind of rising action and some kind of tension and conflict. So obviously they try to take some power away from you, but ultimately, as a player, you're supposed to triumph over this over that conflict, so the power returns to you. But what is it that happens to NPCs and player characters when you turn the console off? And in the last episode, I made the argument that maybe your character kind of like fades out into sleep or something like that. But it's fundamentally different on an offline game because when I turn my PS4 off, the existence of anything that's happening in this game is gone. It's poof. It's up in the air. It doesn't exist anymore. It's as if the universe blinks. The game universe blinks out of existence. It ceases to be until I decide to observe it again. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon, if nothing less, to discuss the prevalence of the observed life in general, because as I've said earlier, when I go to bed, I'm assuming that the events of the universe continue to unfold without my observation, because I'm not there, at least consciously awake, to observe them. And I mean, obviously, there's that expression that if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound, and all the jokes that ensue from there. But the cold reality is, observation, or the phenomenon of observation, is so ingrained, and it feels as if it's liberally taken advantage of, and video games present a really unique way to kind of demonstrate, almost as if like your personal world stops when you go to bed because you're no longer capable of observing your personal world. That seems deeply troubling because in a non-deterministic universe where everybody has their own agency, it's almost as you become, or I should say I become very aware of the fact that the universe is significantly more powerful than I have the capacity to even remotely comprehend, and my failure to observe it doesn't change it from chugging along at through time, which is a whole other contract. And I suppose that's a really good segue to start talking about time travel in this game and the determinism wherein that comes in. There's this really neat mechanic in this game where so you play as Monica and Maximilian, and in this episode you may notice that Monica is wearing a bikini, and my response to you is shut up and leave me alone. I will dress my characters how I want to dress my characters. But Maximilian and Monica are both young adults who are capable of time travel. And they're from two different times, which in this game I will take a look at the different areas that you can explore, like Heimrata and the Gundora Workshop, and Sindane, and Great Jurak, or to check those kinds of things out, to kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about. But these two young adults are capable of traveling back and forth between two different eras, and the plot revolves around the principle that the main villain has removed his blockade, or like blockades that would prevent him from doing what he wants to do in this great world. So he has eliminated origin points, I believe is what they refer to them as, that stop him from taking over the world either in the distant future or in the distant past. And the villain is capable of traveling in either direction in time drastically. So these two lovable young ruffians travel back and forth through time to restore the damage that the arch-villain Griffin has done. I think it's kind of interesting. We'll talk about the deterministic nature of the non-player characters, but we'll talk about the nature of these characters, of the playable characters. So Maximilian, who is my preferred character personally. I enjoy using the wrenches and the handguns more than swords and magic armor. Let's not say that Monica's a fun character, but Maximilian he lives in the quote-unquote present day. He lives in a very big home with his father, and they're very well-to-do. But Maximilian is always wanting to find his mother, because his mother, in his mind, just up and disappeared. But as it turns out, more specifically, Max's destiny is predetermined by the fact that his mom is from the distant future where Monica's from. So Max is a child born of two different eras, and a stone called the Atlamolia Stone takes to him despite being a gift for his father. So Max is despondent, doesn't really have a strong relationship with his dad, and his destiny is kind of laid out before him because this redstone chooses him because he was unlucky enough to have been born to a present-day man and a future woman. I mean, it's kind of badass. Future lady sounds like a delightful strip club of some sort that I would probably go to, because I'm a man of ill repute from time to time. But so Max is from, he's being of two different timelines. His destiny, according to the story anyways, is predetermined. He sets out on this adventure, and it's something that only he can do because he has the capacity to travel through his gift of the Atlamolia Stone to travel forward in time to Monica and his mom's era. Monica, on the other hand, is born in the distant future, where she is born into a royal family, and her father is an emperor, and he's choosing to fight Griffin, because Griffin is this evil, dark, shadowy figure who is trying to manipulate manipulate time in order to get his way. Monica's father is murdered, so Monica takes up arms as what appears to be the only heir to the throne. And she is gifted with the ability to travel backwards in time by stone that she was gifted, although I don't remember why she was gifted it. That doesn't matter. So these two have, at least according to the story, and if we assume, again, to suspend disbelief, these two have a gift, and the universe decides that this gift is designed to correct the wrongs of somebody else. They're not given the choice to do so, or the choice to not do so. It sets it out, and the cards are put in motion for them. And I realize that, typically speaking, when you're playing a video game that isn't an open-world adventure, the story makes the characters live in a deterministic universe. But it's interesting to see their roles in this as they travel back and forth through time. The primary mechanism for doing, or the primary reason for doing so, is to restore origin points. And these origin points are, I think it's Heimrada, Sindane, some ocean coast, I can't remember the name of it. It's in the episode, and Balance Valley. And as they restore these origin points, people who, because of the absence of this place, spontaneously come back into existence. So when you fix something in the present day, the future version of it becomes more and more complete and more what it's supposed to be. And I find that interesting because it presents this uniquely deterministic viewpoint that is otherwise kind of fluid, right? We like to think that the future isn't determined, but the very nature of this game relies on a deterministic future, because if rebuilding a place and putting people in it doesn't garner the same results every single time, then this game has no real story and no real plot. Because rebuilding a workshop or rebuilding a temple is no longer feasible, because the outcome could be radically different because it's two different people building it. And then you could also acknowledge the fact that regardless of what happens, this era of time must happen. So if we accept the deterministic universe and we assume that as players we get to see the past, present, and the future of this game because we are the observer as opposed to the observed, then you could maybe reasonably make the argument that not only is it a deterministic universe, but in every conceivable universe of this game, these events must transpire in the way that they do. And you must, and Max will always be born to a future mom and a past and a present-day dad, and will always explore the world and must always rebuild the damage caused by the villain Emperor Griffin. And I find it kind of interesting because it also supposes that each person that is, I guess, quote-unquote, I want to say resurrected, but kind of resurrected/developed, they come back into existence as you rebuild these temples and workshops and stuff. Only because because of your direct involvement. It's as if their existence is dependent on Max and Monica, which kind of generates this terrifying, like, moral reality where the future rests squarely on the shoulders of these two young adults who, if they don't interfere, lives are literally lost because they become unestablished. There's no place for this person to exist, so they just stop existing. It's kind of cold and calculating. Kind of want to leave this episode because we're going to do a couple more episodes of the Unobserved life. That's it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed and maybe learned a little something. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the format has changed. I'm no longer, at least not in this episode, playing at the same time as I'm recording. As I'm recording audio, I'm doing them separately. I'm trying to edit the audio and video to line up a little bit better. That way I can focus on what I'm talking about a little bit more than trying to think about deeper philosophical concepts and playing a game at the same time, because I enjoy it and I will continue to do them in that way when it happens. But games that are slower paced and lots of load screens are easier for me to edit and cut out in that way. So expect some new formats and some changing formats, and I hope you enjoyed, and don't forget to check out the Scholarly Gamers website. And I look forward to hanging out with everybody on the next video. Bye for now.